I mean, let's just start on this report, shall we? The UK isn't ready to defend itself from a military attack. The UK is not safe. Do you agree?
Well, we're living in a new era of threats, and I think broadly what the Defence Select Committee set out today chimes perfectly with where we set out the threats facing us in the Strategic Defence Review that we published a few months ago. That set out that we're facing new threats, new challenges from our adversaries who are increasingly working together, that we need to learn the lessons from Ukraine. That means retiring old equipment, bringing new equipment that would deter and defeat aggression if necessary. And it also means moving at pace to end the hollowing out and underfunding of our armed forces that we saw under the last government. That's why, since we've taken office, we've increased defence spending, £5 billion extra in our budget this year. Every year ahead of us for the next decade, increasing amounts of defence spending, a desire and a commitment to spend more of that money with British businesses and to refill our stockpiles. And as your reporter was just suggesting in the piece before I spoke, it's around the 13 potential munitions factory sites that we're announcing today. That is creating at least 6 of them in this Parliament, delivering that increased capacity that we need to refill our stockpiles and, importantly, also then sell that excess capacity to our NATO allies, helping to create a stronger NATO. So we are moving at pace, but there is more to do.
I want to talk a little bit more about your announcement today, the 13 new sites that you wove into that answer. But the question that I asked you was, are we safe?
Well, we live in a new era of threats, so there are new threats.
No, stop. I'm sorry, I'm going to come in. We live in a new era of threats. I don't understand what that means, genuinely. I think it's meaningless. Are we safe?
The men and women of our armed forces keep us safe. But because we live in a new era of threat, which means there are new threats facing the United Kingdom, which we set out very clearly in the Defence Review, that means we have to do things differently.
We are safe. We are safe. That's the answer.
Well, we are safe, but we are facing new threats. Both of those can be true at the same time, Sophie. And so what we've got here is the men and women of our armed forces being able to defend against threats, but we need to increase the amount of abilities they have, the capabilities, bring on the new technologies that help them do so, because we know that our adversaries are investing in new technologies. We can see the way that war is now being fought differently in Ukraine than perhaps we had prepared for in the past. That era of expeditionary warfare, where the UK forces fought in Iraq and Afghanistan, that has come to an end. And we now need to focus on our war-fighting readiness against a peer adversary. That means a country like Russia, with its capabilities that we can see being battle-honed and tested in Ukraine, to make sure that our forces, as part of NATO, have the ability to deter aggression, but if called upon, be able to defeat it. And that's why we're investing in new technologies and putting more investment into our forces.
You mentioned Russia as one of the adversaries. I just want to ask about China, if I may as well. It's named in this report, and there's an increased threat from China. We've seen, of course, MI5 warning MPs they're at risk of being targeted by Chinese spies, even naming 2 headhunters on LinkedIn who were targeting advisors, for example, parliamentary staff. And the reason I ask this question is because the trial of 2 alleged Chinese spies collapsed because the government declined to say China was a threat to national security. So is China a threat to national security?
China poses a number of threats to the UK, but they also present a number of opportunities for the UK. It's a complex picture with China, as I'm sure you've heard from government ministers over many weeks on this. That's precisely the reason why yesterday the Security Minister, Dan Jarvis, took the steps of disclosing some of those activities that we have a concern about in relation to threats to undermine our parliamentary democracy. MI5 taking, again, unusual step of publishing advice to parliamentarians, but that's advice that should be heeded by the rest of the public as well, because as we become more online as a community, the ability for people that wish us harm or wish us to gain access to information they shouldn't have access to becomes more plentiful. And that's why we have to take steps to recognise the risks that exist, to invest more in those systems to protect them. And that's why the Minister yesterday set out over £100 million for new technologies to look at securing our online infrastructure and our parliamentary democracy.
We don't have huge amounts of time, but I am keen to ask about these 13 new sites to make military weapons, your big announcement today. You mentioned there that you'll be selling to other NATO countries. But I'm just wondering about where these weapons might be sold to. We've obviously seen Donald Trump hosting Saudi Arabia in the States, saying that they're going to be providing F-35 warplanes. I mean, is that the kind of thing that we might be doing with these new military sites?
Well, the first thing we need to do is refill our own stockpiles, because we've donated much of our kit and equipment to Ukraine, quite rightly, under this government and the last government. We now need to refill those stockpiles with the latest technologies. The munitions factories we're setting out today, with the 13 potential sites, we will build at least six of those factories in this Parliament. That will help provide the energetics, which is the explosives, the part of any munition that goes bang, for people that don't follow this area closely, that we need. There's a shortage of energetics, not only in the United Kingdom, but across the NATO alliance. That's why creating more of these factories in the UK not only helps our own armed forces, but it also supports our ability to export to our NATO partners. Now, we know that our friends in NATO, especially those on NATO's eastern flank that border Russia, are investing more in defence. And that means that we have the opportunity here to make defence an engine for growth, supporting that growth mission, as well as making NATO stronger. And the more that we can cooperate with our allies, it's that collective deterrence in NATO that makes NATO so strong.
I just want to ask you finally about International Men's Day. You might have missed it. It's one of those things that gets nowhere near as much coverage as International Women's Day. And I just wondered, your reflections on it. We see the pressures online, we see white boys' attainment levels, we see lower life expectancy, suicide rates. Do we need to be focusing more on the specific challenges that men and boys face?
I think we do, and that's precisely why Wes Streeting, the health secretary, has launched the men's health strategy today. I think we do need to talk about it a lot more. I think especially if you talk about men's mental health, we've set out in the strategy more investment to talk about it, to start getting after that problem. But there's things that we can all do. It's not just the government setting out plans to enable better support. Being able to talk about how people feel, asking, are you okay, twice, not just once, and then getting an answer that's, keep pressing it. And we've seen in recent years, I think, a lot of progress made on this. I think in particular, I want to praise those football clubs that have used their social media presence to talk about how men's mental health amongst their own fan base is a really important part of getting that conversation going, because we know that the hardest point of accessing that sport is that first step. The ability to check in on your mate saying, are you okay? The ability to make sure that the support is available when someone can take that first step, or when someone can be encouraged to do so because someone's worried about them. We do need to talk more about this, and that's why I'm really glad that you've asked me that question, but also glad that the new strategies come out that will make progress towards getting to the type of support and the type of open conversation that we need around men's mental health in particular.
Yeah, I think it's a great answer. And I love what you say about asking, are you okay, twice? I think that's a really good thing for all of us to take away today in particular. Thanks very much for coming on the programme.